off, and we're going to go in. Do I know what date it is? 3, 2, 1, and hi, welcome to G3. I'm glad you found us again. Today is, wow, it's not February anymore. I think it's March 5th. March 5th, 2015. This is episode 35, and yeah, we've got a great show for you today. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. You can find us on Facebook.com/G3Show, and there you can follow us, follow our postings. We'd love to interact with you. We're having a good time building community on that page. And you can also find our show chat. When you can join us live, you can find a link to our chat there. All right. Another thing I'd like to announce before I bring in my co-hosts is, because I want to do it on the top of the show because I will forget at the end, and I forgot last time. So I wanted to announce something one of our viewers pointed us to. It's called the, it's got a really long name. It's the Internet of Things World Forum Young Women's Innovation Grand Challenge. And for young women 13 through 18 who have great ideas about how to connect the Internet of Things with things like education, healthcare, communication, energy, and transportation, things like that. So if you are a young woman 13 to 18, or you know one who's a techie and excited about this area, please, we'll post a link to that on our page, and maybe you can take the challenge. Okay, so hello, ladies. Hello, Rebecca Woodcock from San Francisco. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Okay, Christy Wells in my upper right.
Hi, everyone.
Also coming from San Francisco in a really sharp image today. Do you have a different camera?
No.
It's looking good, lady. All right. And from Phoenix, Arizona, Francine Hardaway. Hi, Francine.
Hello.
All right. So we've all gathered again. Hello, my lovely ladies. So a little pulse poll for you. I just, was kind of rattling through my brain last night. Anyone using their home phone anymore?
No,
I got rid of mine,
haven't had a
actually.
home phone in 10 years.
No home phone in 10 years. No, Rebecca?
So I haven't used my phone in probably 7 or 8 years. So last year I officially got rid of my home phone number. And so I'm purely internet and cell phone.
Okay.
now.
So you dumped it a while ago.
I've officially dumped the number even last year.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Christy Wells, how about you?
We still have it. We actually use ours mainly as a fax number because we, for whatever reason, have to send a lot of faxes.
Why is that? Right?
I don't know. It's like I have a
Faxes?
scanner. It's like I have a scanner. I can send you this document, through the cloud, and that freaks out some people. So we use our home number as a fax number, and it works. It's included in a package we have that includes like all our other stuff, so it doesn't even cost us anything. So for me, it's like, nah, it's there.
Same.
Never
I think if you call our house number, you get that fax noise. We have a fax number. I mean, we have a phone, but we don't use it. We just don't use it anymore. So the next question is, what about on your cell phone? What about voicemail? Are you leaving voicemail? Do you respond to voicemail? Is voicemail still important?
I don't read voicemail. I tell people not to leave me a voicemail. I tell people on my outgoing message that I don't listen to voicemail.
Aha.
Well, I never answer my phone, so voicemail is critical.
Oh, I don't do that either.
Oh, okay. Sometimes I listen to the voicemail. Usually I do, but
So voicemail. So you say voicemail is critical, but so you do use it.
I use it, yeah. I mean, I don't know whether it's critical or not, but I do use it. I try not to answer the phone when people call because I like to filter out. And
Hmm.
actually, I find that, I don't know, recruiters tend to get my number somehow. And so I'm always getting recruiters calling. So I just don't like answering the phone, especially if I don't have it already programmed into my phone book.
So, but how about this? If someone does leave voicemail and we're not using and Chrissy, did I ask you, are you using voicemail much? Does it?
It's hit and miss. It's like I look down. I don't know if you guys can see it, but I've got, oops, let me go the other way, Christy. There's there, and you can't see it, but I have like 228 voicemails
Okay.
sitting there waiting to be listened to. And, usually I'll just, like,
I
somebody
would
will
call
send me a
that
voicemail.
miss. That does
But
not qualify as hit or miss.
That's
That's
well, I
miss,
miss.
just
yeah.
well, for me, it's like I'll look at the number, and if I recognize the number, I'll just call the person back without even listening to the voicemail. I mean, I
Yeah.
just, or if I'm on a train, I'll listen to a couple of them at a time. But honestly, it just most of my friends are texting me over
Hmm.
leaving voicemails. So the things that are voicemails are random, vendors that get my phone number off the internet, and my mom, who knows better than to leave me a voicemail anyways.
And
Oh,
so that was my maybe another question. Are missed calls the new voicemail? Do you
I think
respond
so.
when you look at a missed call? Does that
depends.
sort of alert you and you go, oh, I have to call them back or
I
text
mean,
them?
for me,
Depends.
absolutely. If I see a friend has called, and or whatever, I'll pick up the phone or I'll text them real quick and say, "Hey, what's going on?"
Hmm.
And so for me, it's the immediacy thing because I just
Hmm.
don't want to sit there and have to dial in and listen to somebody because I'm a rambler, and so if somebody leaves me a voicemail, most of my friends are ramblers too. God love you. I like the expediency of text and that.
Do not waste my time. Right? Right.
I'd rather talk to you live than have you talk to my voicemail.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I do what Christy does. I just call people back, If I see
Mm,
that it's someone I want to talk
jeez.
to, then I just call them back. And if it's a number that I don't recognize, I just pretend it didn't happen.
That's sort
So
of what I do,
so
actually.
excuse me for the crazy flipping here. I think I wrote
What
our
gave you the idea to start with this?
um well, one was last night I listened to my house phone ring and know that it went to two rings and then the fax line got it. And I've just been thinking, I, I don't use voicemail much. I'm realizing that, my parents will leave me messages and then they are upset that I'm not responding to them. And it's really hard for me to explain to them that, um, I don't know, that the voicemail is kind of getting irrelevant and it's like pushed to the back of the queue. They totally don't get that. So I'm trying to be like a little sensitive, but I was just kind of wondering like where everyone is with this. But I think it sounds like we're in the ballpark of the same place.
Well, I
And
think it's interesting because the phone for me is not, it's turned, no, it's no longer a cell phone, right? It's a
mhm,
connection to the internet. And so a lot of people use all the various messaging services. They don't call. If they really want to get a hold of me, they'll find a different way of a text message, whether that's through a social network or direct to my phone to get me.
mhm.
And so it's fascinating. But I do know, like, even on conference calls here in the office, I actually use my cell phone over a landline just because it feels more natural, which is weird.
So if I were to advise someone, and this question goes for each of you, what is the quickest way to get you to respond? What type of messaging am I going to use, or I'm going to tell someone to use with you, Rebecca?
Face. Oh.
I would say one of the messaging apps, either Facebook, text message, or even Hangouts, but probably the first two. And
Okay,
yeah,
so
that's the quickest way.
so Facebook or
Facebook Messenger or just a direct text message.
okay, Francine.
That would be me too, except for my daughter who's in London, and for that I use WhatsApp.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm on some teams and they're using Slack. So as a general rule, it's Facebook Messenger, but I'm using a lot of other platforms for specific purposes.
And Christy?
I'm the same. It's, parroting Facebook Messenger or straight text.
Okay. Kind of interesting. I think that maybe it's obvious to us who are living this, but I think it might be a little bit of an eye opener for some people. So we're living in a different kind of a messaging situation these days, and the phone is not the phone anymore. I wish we'd have a different name for it, honestly.
Well, the phone is
Voice.
100 years old. It's 100-year-old technology. So no doubt it's out of fashion.
Yeah. Let's give it another name. Let's work on that. Okay, Francie?
Well,
Let's just think of something else. Well, speaking of things that are sort of going
well,
away.
it is actually changing.
Huh?
I mean, if you think about voice calls in and of itself, when I call my significant other, we're using Facebook Messenger too for voice calls. We don't actually use the phone service. We're calling each other through the app. And so I think it's going to change in that direction anyway. We're going to be using data and Wi-Fi and all of that for even voice calls.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be why Google is interested in creating a mobile service.
Okay, go ahead. Go for it.
So Google just announced, I guess this week or last week, I'm not sure, that they are going to be developing some sort of a mobile service with the carriers to test out some innovations. And I think they just realized that they're getting left behind when people are starting to message and call each other outside of both the carriers and Google. Google Voice they were the first and they sort of remained the first. They never really advanced. They
I
could
use
have been the app.
FaceTime sometimes. I went to call my daughter, in London. I use FaceTime. And I don't understand why Google needs another service when it has Hangouts. What does that mean?
So they're trying to make the connection between the wireless service and switch over to the cellular service be seamless so that you can create a call or something like that without there being any interruption, which
You mean like
has a lot to
Apple
do
with
with the
FaceTime?
data, right? It's a data voice service anyway. So they're already thinking about how do we move off of this old antiquated voice calling system. Nobody uses their phone anymore. And the carriers are freaking out too. So obviously they're both in the same position where they're starting to be left behind by these other technologies. So how can they figure that out? And of course Google is interested because they have the Android platform and they certainly don't want anything to interrupt their market share or their ability to deliver that to more people if they're following behind, and if the carriers don't want to feel left behind either with an Android type of phone.
Do you think the carriers are freaking out, or if they're just
I think
switching
so.
over to data rather than voice?
Do you think the carriers can do that on their own? They're not going to be able to figure that out cleverly. I mean,
Well-
I'm making phone calls on Facebook. They're cut out in my world.
Yeah, they
Well,
are.
I think this ties into, they just actually spent $25 million at auction recently to buy all the .app domains. And I gotta imagine this is all tied to one another, right? They're gonna become a mobile cell phone carrier. They're laying fiber in all these different cities. They are adding now the .app domain, which I gotta imagine are gonna be a lot of cell phone type apps coming out, or mobile device apps to help you connect with one another. And I just, as much as we kind of, giggle sometimes about some of their projects, whether, that is, we've got Google Plus kind of maybe going sunsetting at a moment and the pieces being broken out. But I think that Google's very smart, in which I love that they're always willing to experiment and that they put a lot of money and time and effort into putting technology out there and seeing how the consumers gravitate to it, and then still continuously pushing the edge. And so I think all of these things they're doing right now are wholly related. And over the next couple of months, it's going to be really interesting to see what they actually come out with as their big strategy.
Yeah,
Because
well, we all
Google does,
laughed when they launched Android, and now they're the dominant mobile platform out there. So they are thinking ahead, and they're thinking, and of course, in a position where Google is in, where they have to continuously try to think of ways to grow. And when you've dominated markets, you can't grow in them anymore. You have to find new markets to grow. So I agree with you. I like that they experiment and try new things.
Well, every new product is like a startup, and they throw up a minimum viable product, which they did,
Yeah.
by the way, yesterday with Google Contacts. They threw up another MVP, and it was very, very cool in certain ways. The interface is beautiful, and then I found out that it doesn't take imports from other contact systems yet. So, they put it out there and it's unfinished, just like Inbox is unfinished. Google Plus, I maintain, was unfinished. It's like they built a car in Google Plus, but instead of finishing it, they just sort of put it on the road without fenders and doors and all that type of stuff. And now they're parting it out. They're like, okay, this didn't work. We'll sell it for parts.
well, that
It's a great analogy.
the I don't know if you want to call it a pivot or parting it out or selling it for scrap or whatever. But that's a common thing in the tech world. You have a startup, you put the product or the service out there, and you find that the usage is a little different than you anticipated, and there may be some little interesting feature that blows up, and then you take that feature and then you make it the thing, right? And that usually means rebranding, all that stuff.
But I do think that the interesting thing about Google is, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, they seem to be the most aggressive with regards to putting out products and letting them live maybe unfinished, and then letting to see what the marketplace does with it, and then pulling them back and plotting another path, right? Like they did that with Google Wave. They're a huge online documentation service with Google Docs and spreadsheets and Drive. It's such an amazing product for a lot of folks to be using that you would think Wave would have been a natural progression to help people work and collaborate with one another, and it just didn't gravitate to mainstream. But then you have Google Plus, who has some really awesome elements. Like I think Google Hangouts is great, right? I love
Yeah,
that.
me too.
And I do think that it's a good, beautiful video and photo platform, but to be honest with you, I didn't need another video and photo platform. So I actually like that they're taking the opportunity now to take a step back and look at their strong suits and figure it out. And I don't think Google has to be a platform or a destination. I think that they have so many little places that you just feed content into them and they'll find the right place to put it, whether that's a YouTube video, it's a Google Doc, or it happens to be a Hangout. But it doesn't all have to live on Google's platform as in Google Plus.
I want to disagree because I think Google's in trouble right now. And part of the reason is that a lot of these products that we think are so cool have no business model. And in the meantime, they're getting the crap kicked out of them on their display advertising because everything's going to video ads and mobile and Google isn't there. So, what are they going to do for a business to support all these issues? Like, these fantastic experiments that they do, they're all wonderful, but if you can't put advertising to them, Facebook seems to be getting the majority of the ad dollars.
That was my reaction when I heard that they were breaking Google Plus up into photos and streams. I thought, what are we in 2005? I mean, think of the future, not the past. You already lost this battle. I mean, I get it. You have to make these things integrated with your Android platform to be relevant, but you should have figured that out and announce something more new and innovative. Hopefully this mobile stuff that they're working on.
Well, maybe that's going to be a way for them to get into the mobile advertising business because they need to have a way to do in-stream ads because that's where everything is going. Twitter's doing in-stream video, Facebook's doing in-stream video, and And Google is really in the ad business. You know, those
Yes.
of us who know ad tech, we know Google's getting left behind here. And that's
Yeah.
where they get all their money from. So they've got to
Well, I gotta on that part, Francine, I have to differ or beg to differ because I do think they make a bit of money through YouTube ads, right? And through that video platform, which has been incredibly successful. And so I think for them, as they take a step back and look at all these different elements, that's where I think it was interesting to see just this week when they make the announcement, you know, at in Barcelona about, you know, them going into the wireless market or providing a mobile plan, that they also then the same week announced the, you know, buying of all the .app domains. And they're positioning it. And I just think that they have an interesting opportunity to take all of these separate elements and they'll figure it out, right? They're going to figure out, like, I buy Google, you know, Docs and as a business account because it actually works for my business and it's a great collaboration tool. And I got to imagine they're making money off of that, enough so that it keeps supporting that platform. But can they do better? Absolutely. I think every company can do a little better, but I think that I appreciate their risk taking. I'm a very conservative risk taker. And so I actually appreciate watching big companies like Google step outside of that and willing to admit, either publicly or privately, you know, some things weren't as successful as they would have hoped. And Google Plus is one of them. We've all been predicting the quote unquote death of it for 2 years now. But I think that they have an amazing footprint on this internet that nobody else actually has, even Facebook. I think just with regards to all the different elements that they can own, whether that be, you know, in the business sense on apps or on the mobile side or on video as well. And so I don't know. I'm kind of excited to see what they do.
So they're a big tree, and it'll take them a long time to fall. But Google is moving into the position that Microsoft, you know, was in before. At the last minute, it seems to have pulled itself up by its bootstraps and you know, made a recovery. But Google. I honestly think Google is going downhill. And again, in the part of its business that's supported by advertising, YouTube ads, as it turns out, are not as lucrative as you think. And 90%, 94% of pre-roll ads either don't get served or get skipped. So there are a lot of technical issues involved in YouTube pre-roll. And I've forgotten, some pundit said yesterday on This Week in Google what percentage YouTube advertising was of Google's revenue, and for the amount of money they spend on, you know, streaming all that content and housing all that content, it's a very small number. I wish I remembered it. Sorry.
I'm also wondering if some of the shifts that we're seeing might be a change in leadership in the in different divisions. I think that in Google's case, we're seeing there was a shift from I think to Bradley Horowitz from Vicnotra. Is that right?
Yeah, Bradley's taken on the whole breakout of the photos and the streams and that whole section.
And we're seeing also, you know, maybe some smart decisions going on in the leadership in Microsoft as well, I think. So, you know, it's kind of maybe interesting to note that sometimes the people who are steering the ship are making these, you know, these big changes and
it's hard to make big changes, you know, turning these ocean liners around. They can't exactly be nimble when they've got 50,000 employees.
And certainly not overnight.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, and were we clear that Google Plus is sort of being partitioned, I guess, is maybe a good word to use, into what's going to be called photos, and then what's going to be called streams, or photos and streams? Is it one thing or is it two? Does
I think
anyone
it's two. I think it's photos and streams.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's two, it seems.
Okay.
You know, Jerry Hughes is saying in the chat room that YouTube ads are shown alongside the YouTube comment cesspool, and that's true of the really display ads. That definitely is, and the comment cesspool is the comment cesspool. That's for sure.
But I think
sure.
they just still back to, I mean, yes, Google is an ad serving machine, but Google's also a data serving machine. And they are still I mean, it's funny we talk about them, maybe going by the wayside at the likes of Microsoft was 10 years ago. And it was funny, it's kind of ironic that it was Google who undertook Microsoft to the search engine side of the house. But I look at it that Google's still my primary, place that I go for information. There's so much potential for them to connect these data points from the web that whether or not ad dollars is where their focus is going to be, I don't know. I just think that for them to be able to take all these different social objects, whether it's videos or photos or contact information or data that lives on the web, and bring it all to me in a well orchestrated feed that I can then consume, I think there's huge dollars in that. I mean, I'd actually pay for somebody to kind of be able to pull all this in and let me structure it the way I want to do. I'm not going to go back into social bookmarking again, but there's a couple things I'd like to get back.
But that's always been the big Google potential, but it's just hasn't really materialized yet.
Yeah.
Coalesced into a really usable, cohesive sort of entity.
Where exactly am I going to come in? And I don't mean to argue with you, Christy, because I love you. But where am I going to see this stream if not on Google Plus, which is where they started, telling me I should see it?
Were you
I mean, I don't
going
know
there
that I
anyway?
need to be honest with you, I've got streams from everywhere. I've got an Instagram stream, I've got a Facebook stream, I've got even a
Right.
Flickr stream I still follow. I don't need another stream, to be
Right.
honest with you. I need a
You
global
need a stream
dashboard.
aggregator, right?
What's that?
A stream aggregator.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
honestly,
right.
that's what I want. I want a stream aggregator. And I think that they're pooling the internet. And there's a bunch of algorithm stuff we can do with ranking and filtering that if you put the control back in the consumer's hand, I think, mainstream is becoming a little more educated with regards to how we consume media. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a technologist. I'm a consumer side, and I know that there's still needs that I have that aren't being filled. And I just think that Google's positioned, if they look at this, in a pretty decent way, or they could shut down in 5 years. I have no idea, but I think it's interesting some of the things that they're pursuing.
None
right
of
now.
us has any idea. That's why we're pundits on a podcast.
Exactly.
Pundits on a podcast.
And
That
I
sounds
always
like a new song.
welcome debate as long as it's done civilly, right? I mean, that's why we all work so well, because we can, choose not to agree with one another, but
Yeah,
be able
right.
to do so in a civil manner.
Must we be civil?
Yes.
Oh,
No
hell
bullying
yes.
allowed.
Damn.
No bullies.
It's ruined my day. Okay.
We have to set an example for the world because so many of the men out there are not
Uh-oh.
civil. So
people.
Well,
does that help you segue into Ellen Pao, or where do you want to go next?
well, it could. It could. I think we're going to be talking about that for a while. You want to give us a sort of a brief on where we're at with the Ellen Pao trial and give us a little background, because I know we're going to be talking about it probably for, I don't know, how long is the trial meant to go on for?
Oh, I don't
4
know.
to
It
6
says
weeks?
5 weeks. But let me say first that I'm sure I'm getting a biased view because I'm following Recode, and Recode has Nellie Bowles and Liz Gaines on the trial, and Kara Swisher at the helm. So it's pretty obvious that they're going to take a rather sympathetic stance to Ellen Pao. But the facts of the case are Ellen Pao was a VC at Kleiner Perkins. She was there for almost 6 years before she was fired. And she had actually filed suit against them before she was fired. And she was a protege of John Doerr. And she was promoted through the ranks, and she became an investor partner, or whatever the first rung up into partner is, before she was fired.
Junior
And-
partner, I think.
Junior partner, and so it makes me believe that the HR policies, and she ultimately sued them for sexual harassment. Because she had had a consensual affair with a male partner, and they'd broken it off. And after that, he was on a bunch of committees that reviewed her performance, and she basically felt like she'd been passed over. And she had the guts to sue, which I think the lawsuit needs to happen.
So it was my impression that she was suing them for discrimination, not sexual harassment.
Right.
Okay. So she's suing them for discrimination for gender, but not sexual harassment. Although they're using a lot of these relationship details to try to discredit each other. Both parties, it seems like they're trying to surface a lot of details around the sexual nature of the relationship between Ellen and one of the other partners. Although it's not particularly relevant to prove or disprove a discrimination case, I think they're using it to discredit each other.
Right. And what's really hilarious is that Ray Lane, who is now a partner emeritus, but was at the time a senior partner, got up and testified that he thought it was in no way discriminatory that he asked Ellen Pao and another female partner to take notes on the whiteboard. And during meetings, and my comment on that is, right, 50 years ago when I entered the workforce, they made all the women secretaries, and you had to walk around with a steno book and take the notes. And I think that is a holdover from that time, and quite frankly, it is discriminatory. I don't care what you think you thought when you said it.
If that question had gone out to a man, though, what would we call it? If a man was asked to take notes at the whiteboard.
His turn. His turn. You tell me how many men are asked, although I do make it a fetish to ask men to take notes. But,
I think asking anyone to take notes is basically asking them to participate less in the
bingo
in the conversation, because you're giving them another job, and the job is basically to keep track of the proceedings, and then that becomes a tool that's helpful later, hopefully, when you're looking over your notes. But you are asking someone to sort of take it for the team.
Steve is mad at me now.
Steve is mad at you? Wait a minute.
Steve just called bullshit on me in the chat room.
Can you feel Steve in the room? Is that what you're saying?
No, I feel Steve in the chat room where he just typed bullshit.
Uh-oh.
I mean, I
might have to turn Steve's camera on.
That was a bit earlier. I said bullshit.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Who was he saying bullshit to, if earlier?
Francine, of course.
Oh.
Something else that I said?
Yes.
Yeah.
I knew it was me. I totally knew it was me. I'm uppity.
Well, he can't say it's me, because then he's in super trouble.
I'm uppity.
Somebody's got to be a scapegoat.
Right.
So going back to this, you probably can't win a case alone on whether he asked, the women in the room to take notes, but the other details that are coming out, such as all the meetings and the events where women were specifically excluded, and when you have testimonies coming out from other partners and very prominent partners saying, yeah, actually, it was a lot harder for me, and these people have serious credibility, that's not looking good for them.
If nothing else, they really need to get their management, tactics down pat, because you don't keep someone who you think is a non-performer around for 6 years. If any startup did that, the investors would jump in and shut them down. What happened to Fire Fast?
There's so many corporations around the world, though, Francine, that have non-performers on the payroll. So I don't know that I'd even use that as a metric
But
for
they're not
whether there's a case or
investors who
not.
give the opposite advice, and and also they're not small companies. It's not like Kleiner Perkins is Microsoft. It's a smaller company.
Well,
And
now we're getting into, I mean, there's non-performers and then there's super performers and then there's somewhere in the middle. And
Right.
have they determined that she was a non-performer, or was she just not one of these stellar performers? Because if that's the case, then anyone who's not getting promoted should be fired. That's not the case either.
Right.
I mean, you
And that's
shouldn't
kind
just.
of that's kind of what I was hinting to, is that there's some people that, you will always have the upper echelon of the folks that are the quote unquote consistent thought leaders in the company, or always bringing new data or information. And then you have the people that are just doing good work, but they're not technically standouts. And does that make them, like you said, like Rebecca, that's kind of what I was
Yeah.
hinting with Francine, is there's a lot of companies out there, big or small, that have that middle tier group. And, I've seen it in startups as well as I've seen it in Fortune, 100 companies. And so it does happen in every type. And I just
yeah,
think it's
but if you're
interesting
not
find
going to
out.
fire them, don't fire them suddenly after 6 years after they file a lawsuit.
Well, that's an issue.
I mean, that's
I think we're all in agreement. That's an issue.
I mean, I'm all for firing her and saying that she's a poor performer. I have no way to judge if she's a good performer. But after 6 years, and just suddenly, after they promoted her 2 or 3 different times, it just sounds weird. But I will say this: she's not perfect. That's coming out in the trial too. She definitely wasn't perfect. So this is going to be one of those things we like to call nuanced. And it'll be interesting to see which way it breaks. But I love it because it's getting a conversation started, or rather continuing a conversation that already was started, about how women are treated in the tech industry and how younger women aren't going into it because, they see this.
Yeah. Well, when one of your coworkers shows up at your hotel room in a bathrobe and you have to shove him out the door, I don't know where that kind of behavior is okay. Apparently, in particular VC firms. Although, to their credit, they did end up firing him once the complaints came out. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that there's just an entitlement thing. Mary's not on here, but I wish she were, because she was saying they filter through aggressiveness, right? Which means that if you're aggressive and you're a man, it's okay. And if you're aggressive and you're a woman, it's not okay. And I hope she comes on next week and talks about it, because she has some really good things to say.
Well, I think the interesting thing to this too is, and I like that, yes, this court case is bringing more conversation around this topic. I've never been one about beating the drum and, women in all power. I'm just like, do good work and surround yourself with people. And I believe, good things will come, not to the impact of it's all karma, but that's for a later conversation. But I thought it was interesting that Marissa Mayer came out a couple of days ago and thought that you said something that kind of shocked me a little bit, that she doesn't think there's a gender issue in Silicon Valley or the tech industry. And, there were some stats coming out and saying, Yahoo's 37% employees are women. And so, it's a company led by a woman CEO as well. And so I think the best part of this case is, you're going to get a lot of people speaking out about it. You're getting a lot of different opinions. But I think the best part is all these stats coming out to kind of prove with data what actually is really happening inside the tech industry.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty cool, and I'm a Marissa Mayer fan. I mean, whether she gets it turned around or not, she is giving it one heck of a try. And all the things that people say about lateness, or whatever it is that they call her to task for. She does have 37% women. That's the smallest thing. The other thing is that she has revamped the whole company. They've got all those great mobile apps, they've got all the great news, and they have a whole lot of users, and they haven't lost users. So they're calling her to task because her ad revenues haven't gone up. But your ad revenues can't really go up until there's content that people want to see on platforms that people want to use. So she had a big job to do, and I'm believing that the ad revenues will go up now. Hello, nobody has anything to say.
Okay. Yeah, unusual for the ladies, right? I mean, come on.
Yeah. I just thought it was interesting that you've got somebody with the namesake like Marissa Mayer who comes out and says she doesn't see that there's any gender issue in the tech industry. I just was throwing it out there for discussion.
I was surprised
I thought it was kind of
also.
fascinating.
Well, I mean, she's got a nursery next to her office. For her, there is no gender issue. She got asked to be the CEO of a publicly traded company, and she's
For her, there's no issue, yeah.
She has no issue. Actually, truthfully, I didn't have any issue either because I barreled past it. And there are women who barrel past it. But I've come to believe later in my life, although I ignored it my whole life and said, oh, no, there's no issue because I'm making it. I feel like there's a moment where you have to help. You can't be like the black families that move out of the ghetto and then won't help their black neighbors. You have to really be somebody who's going to help further the cause for women in general, not say there's nothing. So I much prefer what Sheryl Sandberg is doing, although I don't really agree with her either. But
Right. So, Cheryl, the Lean In organization announced their new campaign. Maybe it's a annual type of thing where they take a new look at things, but they are talking about Lean In Together, and Lean In Together is eliciting the help of men, and sort of changing, where last year we were talking about the ban the word bossy and all the other, lean in constructs. This year we're talking about having the support of men because I think the idea is that the change is going to come not just from the women leaning in, but also from men being a part of this. So
I got to tell you something, Tina. Just because I said there was no activity in the chat room, today there is fabulous activity in the chat room. And Teresa Sullivan just said another very interesting thing. Portfolio companies tend to mirror VC behavior. I know a Kleiner Perkins company that fired all the women in management at about the same time that Trey Visello was let go. Due to VC storytelling incentive, weak startups are basically running Potemkin villages to try and put out an image to VCs that fits their patterning biases. That is really, if that is true, that is even more scary.
That's disturbing.
Yeah, that is very disturbing. But, it has to be considered because, of course, if you're trying to get somebody to invest in them, you're going to pretend that you at least pretend and maybe just adhere to their biases. You're not going to stand up to them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something we never think about.
That they're firing the entire management layers of women or entire teams. That's really extreme. I mean, I don't even know what to say. I'm speechless to that. That's unbelievable.
Well, this is a case where you have to hear from the other side and find out, if those women, what the women who were on the team thought at the time they were fired and what the Kleiner Perkins, that's why I'm glad it's a court case,
Right.
'Cause you get to read the briefs. I've read the briefs in this case. I don't usually do that because I have ADD, but I did it because I thought this was fascinating and because it didn't seem to me to be a clear-cut case. And
Right.
so, which now that I've read the briefs, it really isn't.
It's
I mean,
never a
No.
clear-cut case. When it's a
right,
clear-cut case, you settle things before you go to
right.
trial. They're never clear-cut cases. That's why you're, in a courtroom.
But that is why I admire Ellen Pao because I mean she does have a point of view and she is willing to spend a lot of money and a lot of time and go through a lot of brain damage, which is really what happens in a lawsuit. It's just total brain damage. It's not as much brain damage for Kleiner Perkins, but for the individual who sues, it is. And I swear to you, if she were the CEO of anyone but Reddit, she'd be out on the street. And actually, in Reddit, people are asking questions also.
Mm-hmm.
And
There's a lot of
Reddit,
money at stake for her too. I mean, if she wins this case, this could be a huge thing for her.
right. But,
But it's not like she's doing badly now or she's unemployed.
yeah,
True.
exactly. I mean, she's going to get a whistleblower stigma slapped on her, no matter what happens in the case, because if you look at the history of whistleblowers, which is really what she is, the history of whistleblowers is that a lot of them do not get treated very well. And they
Yeah,
don't,
like usually always they don't.
like usually never do they get treated
Right.
well. Right. So there's no real, you have to really
True.
believe to be a whistleblower because you just are, you just know that you're going to sacrifice everything. All those guys on Wall Street that blew the whistle about the banks, most of them just got fired and discredited. And, where are they now?
So speaking of discrediting people, what do we make of the I don't know if that's a good enough segue, but I'm going to go with it.
Okay. Who are we discrediting now?
Hillary Clinton,
Oh, right.
because she
Because she's,
used
you know,
private email during her stint as Secretary of State. Not only private email, but private email servers in her home. So even, another step away from what she was supposed to do, I guess. Although I think we're sort of hearing that it wasn't the law, or it wasn't a fixed position that they had to use a government email. So where is this, and why is this important?
It's important because she's going to declare that she's running for president, and they're trying to get that revelation out of the way so that it doesn't bother her after she declares. Do I think it's right to use private email? If the rule is that you're supposed to use public email, then it's wrong. If there's no rule, that's even more wrong because you can't have people speaking on behalf of the United States, going outside the organization.
I think
Well,
that's where I have the struggle with it, whether or not they're on her own servers or not. She's officiating, like, it's official business. She's not officiating. She's doing
mhm,
official business.
right.
Right.
And I think I'm challenged with that because, I started to say a little bit, like, there's times I actually use my Gmail account for my professional work life just because it's easier when I'm reaching out to certain people and I have their contacts in that account already. Or it's synced to certain Google Docs already that I'm using, which is easier. But I think when you're a government official and the type of information that she's going through, I just think you have to kind of fall within the protocols that are set. And and I've read a bit about it. I haven't read everything, but from what I understand, there were conversations that asked her not to do it, and she continued to do it. And that's the part I have the most trouble with. It's not that she did it in the first place, because there's rights or wrongs around that. But when you're requested to not do it and you continue to do it, then I actually have some trust issues with her, and it does kind of muddy the water a lot for me too. I also
I
think it's
have
slow
them
news
too.
day for the Republican Party, and so they're really putting some fire underneath this. So, but I do think it's gonna bite her a little bit, and I think she's got some explaining to do on this because there's definite security risks. You know, it's not like you're just saying, hey, we're going to come over to my dinner party. Who wants to come? It's like you are dealing with state, you know, you're the
Yeah.
Secretary of State. You're dealing with official business.
Well,
It's
it
not a
seems
he
to
or
be a
should be.
multifaceted issue. I mean, there's you know, privacy issues, security issues. Obviously, there's just that. How are you representing the government, and how it looks?
You mean
And
with your
certainly, you
AOL
know,
account?
if she's being asked to not do that, that's going to be. I mean, you said that you're reading that. I hadn't read that yet, but that's going to be pretty interesting. So, like, is there this feeling of hiding something? You know, I mean, why do it?
Right.
Why
Well, and especially because
why
it's
do
not
it?
like she's new to being a government
No.
official, right? I mean, she's a lifer, so to speak.
Yeah,
And
but she
I
got
just,
nailed during the Whitewater scandal with all these audit trails of emails and stuff like that. And so I bet she has quite a, you know, a concern for privacy. But I do think Obama should have told her that I mean, she must have sent emails to Obama from a personal account. Where was Obama answering her back saying, please use the office email?
Well,
right.
really, well, here, I mean, that would be my thing. It's like, you know, you ask someone to do something and then they don't comply with it, and you ask them a few times. If that's the case, then where's the problem then? I mean, if I think the problem is lying with, you know, who's calling the shots, and how they're calling the shots. I mean, it seems kind of inconceivable that she would be allowed to do this if this was a real no-no.
well, and
Who
I think
else in
that's
the
the thing
Obama
that
Hang on,
administration?
Christy, go ahead.
I was going to say again, it just keeps coming back down to if I use my personal Gmail to reach out to somebody on behalf of my company, but it's a simple request like, hey, are you available to talk to me on this date, right? That's one thing. But it's not like I'm actually sharing company secrets or intimate confidential information, which you know she's probably doing in her capacity in her role. And so that's where I have the struggle is that who's actually monitoring the servers at her own home, right? Who's managing that? Who's making sure that the proper data protection layers exist so that there isn't breachable activity to take place? And not that the government's unbreachable, because we've seen that they can get hacked just as easy as everybody else. But for me, at least there's some systems in place. And I just think that that's the type of conversations, you know, if it really, like I said, it really kind of comes down to three things for me. It's one, if she did do it after being asked not to do it, I have a problem with that. Two, the data protection and the security issues I have concerns with. And, you know, three, the types of emails that were being sent, and are they actually all available, or can they mysteriously disappear easily because they're not on a government website?
Okay, and I have one to add to that. Who else in the Obama administration who is not running for office and therefore who is not being surveilled right now was also using private email? And
Totally.
I'm going to guess she wasn't the only one.
Mm.
Well, so it brings up an, gosh, it makes me think, you know, she's not naive. And it's not like, oh, well, I didn't know, or I just, you know, it was more convenient. A woman like Hillary Clinton knows you keep your nose clean by keeping a proper paper trail and making sure that everything is documented. And email even is, you write certain things in email so that you do have records and things. And so that she even deliberately, the servers and everything, deliberately routed emails outside of her official government email address, which, you know, there may be some more security issues or some sort of paper trail or monitoring or whatever it is. She must have been clearly conscious about this, because she is not naive to even just having that liability paper trail.
Right.
You know, everything is discoverable, and email especially. So the fact that you're doing it outside of your government email even makes it more incriminating. And she should have known that. I can't see how she wouldn't have. So then what was her thought process to make that decision? Because this is clearly the fact that she had servers. This was a conscious decision.
Clinton
Francine-
exceptionalism.
Go ahead, Francine. Sorry.
Clinton exceptionalism.
There
She's
you go.
also a lawyer. I mean,
That's
that's the shocker. She's also an attorney.
right.
There's something going on that we don't know.
There is something going on that we don't know.
And it isn't Benghazi, because it was before Benghazi too, you know? There's something.
Something she didn't want. Regardless, even if she didn't want it under the radar of the government email, it would be discoverable. That's what I don't get about.
Right.
Well, I
There's
think the
no true anonymity on the internet ever.
Right.
Well, and I
Okay,
think
but
that
We
Francine-
found out.
let's and Christy, just one second. Let's remember though, there was not the requirement at the time that she was Secretary of State to have to have her email on the government servers somehow. This is what.
Well, that's a whole other issue, because that goes to how bad the technology is in the government.
Yeah.
And the IT processes and the data security processes, and you know, and on and on and on.
So
But I think
whose
that
fault
ties
is this?
into what Francine was saying earlier, though, and take this not just with Hillary Clinton in her role, but think of everyone in the State Department or the government went rogue and started having emails. Think about how that actually happens and translates into a business environment. And everybody, you know, I worked for startups before where everybody just used their own Gmail accounts because we didn't even have our own company server set up at the time we were launching. And so there's months of communications that are stored on our own personal quote unquote servers. But I just think that it's a fascinating discussion to have, because there's so many. If I'm the CIO of the United States, I'm freaking out right now, because it's like there is some infrastructure that has to be in place to ensure that the protocols are followed, and, well, first, that there is a protocol, and two, that they're followed, and that you're protecting the data as best as you can. And I just think that this is a fascinating case to then translate into a business environment and how startups operate and how other businesses operate and the allowances we make for employees to use personal emails versus being on the network.
Well, here's actually another point. I have a friend who works for the government, and she was involved in the DoD, so she was part of the secure email system. And actually, she had a really hard time accessing the email oftentimes. So just playing devil's advocate here, is it possible that Hillary just needed to get shit done, and you just can't wait until that VPN or whatever, you know, it takes 15 or 20 minutes to try to connect, and then it fails, and all those.
And
That is definitely cited as an issue, that you know, sometimes business had to be done right then and there, and something was down.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you never use it. That means you sometimes don't use it.
But if it means that you're having to sort of like, you know, go back and forth, I can start to understand that, you know, maybe you go to what's more stable. I mean, what if her system was more stable?
Yeah.
Well, the government system we know is outmoded because everyone says so. I mean, every technologist who goes to work for the government, you know, like the people who worked on the Obamacare website and Kara Swisher's wife, you know, they all say that the government runs on 1990s technology.
Yeah.
So that might be.
If you're a
It's kind of scary.
Secretary of State, some things probably really important need to get done, and you just can't. Maybe you can't wait for the technology to waste an hour of your time while it's trying to load, which is what actually does happen with these government technologies.
Well, I think we're going to be hearing about it a lot more, and as Ricky Ricardo would say, you got a lot of explaining to do.
A lot of explaining. Right?
That's true.
Because that doesn't mean never use the government technology. It means don't use it if there's an emergency and you need to do something quickly.
Or make a phone call.
Yeah. Oh, a phone call. What's that?
Oh, right.
I'd like to wind up with the story about Coach Curt Schilling, and he had congratulated his daughter, who and Curt Schilling was a baseball player. and a coach at a couple major universities.
And we loved him at the Diamondbacks,
There we go.
Arizona.
And he was congratulating his daughter on Twitter for being accepted at a college and being placed on their softball team, right? Do girls play baseball?
It's softball.
Softball.
I cannot answer that.
Okay. And at first he got some, some bro kind of feedback, like, like to take your daughter to prom, that kind of stuff. And then he said something a little bit somewhat threatening, but not really, kind of like a back off sort of statement. And then he got a lot of really, really ugly things said about him and his daughter in very sexual, vile kind of language. And he, in a matter of about an hour, sort of outed the perpetrators of this communication on Twitter. People who think that they are invisible, people who have, hide behind the egg. And he called out, this frat boy and this, baseball player. And it was kind of an interesting post. If you didn't get a chance to read it, I suggested it was a kind of an awesome thing for a father to do too. And just to say, and I think that this is one of those examples of where, we're asking men to just step up and say, you can't do this. You can't say shit like that. And I started to think about it. And I'm wondering if there's maybe something like digital rape. And I think I'd like to think about that for maybe another show, but some of the because this is the end of this one. But when you can say really sexual and violent and vile types of things, is that allowed? And why should it be allowed?
Well, I think the most interesting thing about this is, and I've always gone on the bandwagon of be accountable for your words, right? If you say something, there's consequences that can come to that. And out of the two gentlemen that were launching some slurs, one of them I know for sure has been fired from his job. So
Bravo.
His employer took it to such a serious level of like, you're just not the kind of person we want to employ.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, the fact that they were actually trackable back accounts is one thing, because they were talking under their own profiles. If it was an anonymous account, you don't have that luxury of being able probably to easily do that. But I just think that we've talked about it several times about the internet and, who you are and how you're representing yourselves. And if you say really crappy things, you've got to be held accountable to it. And I actually applaud Kurt for pushing it out. We've done similar in the past, even with Social Media Club, where we've tried to really install ethics and show people there's good standards to follow. And we've had to out a couple people. And honestly, we've gotten some blowback for doing that. And so I'm glad he's getting the support, because I think it's really important to just say you can't be that much of a shithead, right? You got to treat people with respect. And I think there's larger implications, which I would love to dig into in a future show. But I do actually applaud that somebody has taken the steps to make somebody accountable, and that hopefully we'll see more of that.
I'm impressed. How did he get the names and all the details about the people so quickly?
Google.
Yeah, must have been. And listen, it's his
I think
daughter,
you can associate
when
sometimes
it's your daughter.
What's that?
When it's your daughter and you're a man, I mean.
Oh yeah, you get ways.
You got ways.
That's true.
That's right.
You can find a surprising amount of information about people using whatever little information you're given.
Yeah.
Well, like we said last week, we know we can find Rebecca's home address.
No,
That's just
we don't want to. We could probably
Please,
find.
let's not point that out.
let's dox Rebecca.
Hey,
Yeah, right.
hey!
For no reason.
No, I don't like the way this has turned
I think I
out.
might have to move now.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the fact is that we're all out there, and we're all pretty visible, and you can find people, right? So that means you don't shoot your mouth off so that people want to be want to find you. You act responsibly, and people who don't act responsibly will probably be called out and found out, and hopefully in legal and just
We need to start
civil
teaching
ways.
digital literacy in school.
What's that?
Oh,
We
yes.
need to start teaching
sure.
digital literacy in school, in like elementary school.
Digital literacy
Yeah.
and responsibility.
Well, that's what I
One
mean.
of the
Right.
four tenets of Social Media Club, Francine. We can still find a way to do it. It's been something we've been trying to talk about for 10 years. We just need people to take action in it, right?
I
We just
know,
need teachers
I
to
know.
embrace that. And
Yep.
Well, do we need that, or do we need do we need Facebook and Twitter and the like to embrace it?
Well, that too. I mean, but there you get into the huge political free speech
There are social
issues. But
citizens,
if you do it in the classroom to elementary school students, it's the same as teaching them to brush their teeth.
well, it's a cultural thing too, right? It's got to be done in the household as well, because it's like, who's raising these folks who actually think it's okay to talk to other people that way?
Right.
And so for me, it's multi-tenanted. It's not just, can we talk to our friends or our partners to like help shape them, or can you teach them in school, but can you do it in the household, and can you do it in the office place? I just think that we have to be conscious, good citizens across the board, and I get a little pious in that respect and stand on a soapbox about it because I'm so passionate about it. But I think it's culture too, which just sucks
Right.
sometimes.
Right. It is
Well,
culture.
there's also knowledge. I mean, the current teachers and a lot of parents don't even know how to use these technologies, let alone what's going on and how their children are even using them. There's no knowledge to even pass that literacy down. So even the teachers and the parents need to be educated.
That's true. There's a huge generational divide. I mean, it can be very
Right.
obvious. Sitting in on a couple of workshops at a high school, my daughter's high school, where I thought, boy, everybody's going to be really up on these things. Oh no, they were not. I mean, not at all. And maybe the people who attended were the ones who really needed the help and really didn't get it. But I was shocked. And
Well, I'm
you're
on the
right.
board
There's
of
a
a
huge
STEM school.
generational divide.
Yeah, I'm on the board of a STEM school in the inner city, and a lot of the parents are not native English speakers, and their kids are totally computer and phone literate, and they are not, and that's
Yeah.
a huge issue.
Well, that sounds like another show. So
Yep.
great. I like this. At the end of one show, we find our place to the next show's topic, and that sounds good for me. Okay, so let's wind this one up. I think we're around our hour mark. We've been trying to keep it under an hour, but we're really bad at that. So we are. Thank you to Ustream. We're using Ustream to stream and record G3. Thank you to NewTek, and they have a lovely gadget called the TriCaster. You can see it, part of it here. This is the sort of the keyboard interface to it. Lots of buttons, and it's fun, and I love it. Thank you to NewTek. Thanks to Steve, who has reworked some of our sound, so some of our sound problems have gone away. Yay! And what else?
Thanks
Thank
to you,
us.
the
Oh,
host,
thank the
Tina
chat room.
Gilmore.
Thanks
Thanks
to
the chat room.
should I take a bow? I'll take a bow. Thank you to the chat room. Yeah, thank you to the chat room. Thank you for being there. 1 or 2 or 3 of you. It's great. Bring your friends. We love you. It's always fun. And as we know in the Gilmore Gang has been going on for a long, long time, and it's developed a chat over the years. But the chat room does bring another a sort of dimension and element to the show, and we'd love you to participate in it. So keep that up. Thank you. Thank you to Rebecca Woodcock. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thanks, Tina.
Christy Wells.
Thank you.
And Francine Hardaway.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here today. And let me get ready, and we'll say bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. That I thought was a great show.